Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, is a graduate of Stanford University, author of Communist Revolution in the Streets, president of the Foundation for Economic and Social Progress, and contributing editor to American Opinion. A former jockey, ballet dancer, and once flyweight boxing champion of Seal Beach, California, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gary Allen.
Revenge is mine. First of all, let me say that it is a distinct honor for me to be here with my favorite authors and to be here with my favorite people. Scott doesn't really know what I'm going to speak about, and frankly, the subject is unspeakable. The communists are bad enough, but I intend today to expose that lowest form of human being, the editor. The title of my talk is, What Are Editors For? And the first point I am supposed to make is that editors are to teach writers not to end sentences with prepositions. Unless, of course, it is for emphasis. And since I'm here to emphasize Scott Stanley, not to bury him, Scott Stanley, of course, you may feel it's wrong for someone to come in here and praise his boss, but I've been assured that no matter what I say, I won't get a raise. And I have been in something like 55 consecutive issues of American Opinion magazine, so if I don't have any job security now, there's nothing I can say that's going to get me any. I think that the two hardest working individuals in the world are probably Robert Welch and Scott Stanley. Now, everybody knows how hard Robert Welch works, or at least I think they should. But Scott, who I affectionately refer to as the mole, as you can tell by looking at him, he looks frankly even more molish in the morning when he gets out of bed. Scott puts in something like an 80-hour week. He does a job, in many ways a thankless job. He's often told me that the mark of a good editor is that nobody notices him. Now, in his case, that may just be a giant rationalization. And I would go further, except he gets the microphone back after I sit down. I could tell a number of stories about Scott, but then he could tell a few about me, too. It has been said that Scott Stanley is either the youngest 79-year-old man or the oldest 33-year-old in the country today. The reason he looks 79 is the fact that he's already put in as many working hours as the average 79-year-old man. He is probably the nation's greatest editor and corniest orator. Before giving this, I tried to find out a little something about Scott Stanley's early childhood, and I was told that he didn't have one. That he sprung full-blown, or as full-blown as he is, from the temple of Zeus. But there is a story behind Scott Stanley, of course. I talked to Professor Root this morning, who was Scott's mentor in college. He assured me that while Scott often ditched class, that his work was exemplary and that he kept the campus in constant turmoil. Most people are not aware that Scott Stanley was selected as the most valuable player on the Earlham College football team in 1959. I'm sure he is probably the dirtiest player that ever played football. He made up for what he lacked in size with heart, spirit, determination, and just plain downright nastiness. He is the kind of player who would, when your hand was sticking out of a pile, would run by and step on it. And incidentally, I'll put in here parenthetically, I think we should discuss here the most important event of the year. I've noticed on the badges of a number of people here that we have a large delegation from Ohio. And I would like to say to you, Stanford 27, Ohio State 13. Eat your damn Buckeye hearts out. Scott Stanley was a founding member of YAF, Young Americans for Freedom. He was the first person to loan William Buckley his 30 Days to a More Powerful Vocabulary book. And when Scott became a rival editor, although Buckley betrayed his low breeding by saying unkind things about Scott, ever the chivalrous individual, whenever he is in a public lavatory and sees that famous graffiti written on the wall, "William Buckley rides side saddle," always erases it. I am an avid reader of National Review. I find that if I read American Opinion at bedtime, it keeps me awake. If I read something from the left, it makes me angry. But if I want to go to sleep, there is no cure for insomnia like National Review. It may well put Nitol out of business. Scott Stanley is probably the only person I know who is equally at home at a tea party of some Back Bay Brahmin discussing Keats and Shelley, or in a barroom brawl on the docks. Unfortunately, he works so hard now, he has little time for either, but I consider the ability to do both a distinct compliment. Scott Stanley turns out And incidentally, he didn't know I was going to do this, and I'll probably regret it the rest of my life. Scott Stanley turns out 2 magazines, a monthly and a weekly, as you know, that under any normal circumstances it would take at least a staff of 15 to do what he and his secretary and Mrs. Welch do. I've seen these people working on the weekends, reading copies. It is incredible to me that anybody can work as hard as these people do. And while I'm throwing all the accolades here to Scott, I wonder if his secretary is around somewhere. Lee Clark, one of my favorite people. Did she disappear? Well, Lee Clark, at the time she went to work for Scott Stanley, weighed 200 pounds. It is now down to 68 and a quarter. I've worked for Scott Stanley now for about 5 years. We've only had really one argument in that time, in which I think he was mad at me. I wasn't really mad at him. I wanted to do the article on the bankers in 2 parts, and he wanted it in 1, but there wasn't much he could do about it because I was writing it. A lot of lines that I consider the best that I have done wind up on Scott Stanley's cutting room floor. I think that there is a great deal of prejudice involved in this. I am considering printing privately a book of lines that have been deleted from my American Opinion articles. And when I do so, I am going to dedicate it to Alan Stang and his pet hippopotamus from Chicago. You don't remember that line, obviously. I don't know why it is Alan can get those things through and I can't. Scott Stanley, through brilliance, energy, and sweat, has made American Opinion what I believe to be the most informative, incisive magazine in the United States today. Of course, it's probably bad form for me to say that since I contribute to it, but I only contribute 20%. And much of what I do under the guidance of Scott Stanley, the man who assigns the articles, the man who must make the magazine come out even. You have no idea how much work goes into a magazine. I think this magazine now has influence in places that you wouldn't believe. Influence in places that I think some of us know about and are not always at liberty to reveal. If you will go back through old issues of American Opinion, I think you'll find that compared with any other publication in the United States, we have put out more information. We have been correct about more people and events further in advance than any other publication in the United States. If you'll go back to your old issues, you'll see who was right and who was wrong about people like Pierre Elliott Trudeau and Richard Milhous Nixon. My time is up. I could go on talking about Scott Stanley, the successor to William Jennings Bryan as the boy orator of the Platte. But I am sure that I am speaking for all of his authors up here in saying that we consider him the most magnificent of magnificent men. This rally each year pays tribute to some particular patriot who has put in many years in the fight against communism and collectivism. Scott Stanley's only 33, and I guess it'll have to be another 20 years before they put a dinner on in honor of him. So this is the tribute to Scott Stanley from his authors, who so deeply appreciate him. And it is my personal tribute to the man that I consider my closest friend, my editor, Scott Stanley. Thank you.
I knew it. Once in 55 months, I didn't tell him what to write about. Alan Stang, I certainly want to thank you for bringing your pet hippopotami.